I think one of the best things about Anchor is for somebody that was a little nervous going into their podcast, first recording their podcast experience. It gave me all the tools necessary to record my own podcast. It gave me sound bits. It gave me recording tips. It gave me everything. So I would recommend Anchor to anybody who's a first-time podcaster or a veteran looking to expand their brand. In order to get Anchor, you can either download the Anchor app from the store, from your phone's store or computer store, or also go to anchor.fm to get started. Welcome to the Syracuse Lacrosse Podcast. I'm your host, Dan. You can get a hold of me via Twitter and or Instagram at Cuse1987 with any tips, suggestions, feedback, anything that you might need, anything that you want to talk about. Feel free to reach out to me on social media. A little background on me. I know I should have done that on the first episode, but I have been a season ticket holder for a while. Can't really remember, to be honest, the first year that I got season tickets, but I can tell you that I think I attended my first game, I want to say in 1997. So I've been going to SU games since then. Really good, fun time. I joined a group on Facebook called Cuse Yourself, and I saw them doing a podcast for the fans, from the fans. That's not what it's called, but that's what it entails. They give the football side and they give the basketball side from the fans, so from their perspective, which is great because a lot of times we just type on social media. We never hear somebody talk about what we're feeling like, or how we feel about the game, or what guys stepped up in a loss, what guys played good. So feel free to give them a follow if you haven't already. If you haven't listened to their podcast, I highly recommend it. It is available on YouTube, so you can watch it. But feel free to give their podcast a follow and also reach out to them on Facebook. The group is called Cuse Yourself. It's a group of Syracuse fans for every sport. But anyways, after seeing that and listening to them and seeing how good a job they did, I guess I would say inspired is the right word. I was inspired to put out a podcast about lacrosse. I played lacrosse my whole life, so it's something that I know a lot about, and like I said before, I've been going to SU games for a while, so I thought at some point we have podcasts for basketball, we have podcasts for football, we have guys that do national stuff for lacrosse, we have guys that talk about D1 lacrosse, we have guys that talk about certain programs, but this Syracuse program needs to be talked about given its history. Given everything that's happened for this lacrosse team, so I thought about it, and after going back and forth with a few friends of mine, who I would typically talk about the games to, it was my idea. Well, in theirs, I have to give them a little credit. They gave me some segment ideas. To come up with a podcast from the fans for the fans. So at some point I'm gonna lock in a couple of guests. If you want to reach out to me, once again, my social media is Cuse1987, and that is on Twitter and or Instagram. Please give it a follow. Please reach out. We're gonna talk a little bit about what I would consider the Christmas Day feeling for a lacrosse fan. That moment when you open a present and you're just like, oh my God, that's so good. Or this is exactly what I wanted. I had that feeling, I think it was Tuesday. I happened to get sent an email, and then I saw a Facebook post that Syracuse had released their schedule. Typically Syracuse release their schedule after Christmas. I think part of the reason why they released their schedule this early, I guess, air quote early, is the fact that other teams' schedules are coming out and people are seeing Syracuse on it, and people kept asking, when is the schedule going to come out? I want to know when they're playing, who else they're playing. I believe it was Albany. I know Johns Hopkins released theirs. A couple other schools. So I feel like the university wanted to just get theirs out and talk about it a little bit, get the people a chance to soak it in a little bit before the games happen. I mean, but let's get into the schedule. Let's go. We're gonna go through game by game. We're gonna talk a little bit about it, and then I'm gonna give my overall thoughts on their record, who they're gonna lose to, that kind of stuff. So, the first game, the home opener, is actually on February 7th against Colgate. Now, I remember this game because Syracuse lost to Colgate 12-9. But the thing I remember from last year is the gut reaction from a lot of fans, including myself, who said, if we lose to Colgate, where is this team going to go? I would say my expectations dropped tremendously after that game. I had high hopes going into the year with what could happen to this team. It was a very experienced team coming into the year, so I had very high hopes. And I think I was more in shock that they lost. And so I had to turn to people to make sure it actually happened. I'm sure I wasn't the only one. I can say that from the reaction that I talked to, from the people I talked to. So anyways, Syracuse hosts Colgate on February 7th. That game will be played at 7 p.m. That is on a Friday, actually. So look for a home opener on a Friday. Typically, the way that it works out is for these smaller, smaller isn't the right word. For the Central New York schools, Syracuse typically will play them on a weeknight. That's just how the schedule seems to work out every year. So that works out the way that does. Like I said, Colgate beat Syracuse last year 12-9. Shocked everybody in the orange. So the game after that, back to Colgate for a minute before I go ahead. I think Syracuse rebounds. I think they come out with a little bit of fire. They get amped up for this game. They know what happened last year. A lot of guys on the team from last year, so they don't want it to happen again. I wouldn't say dominate, but I would say that they win the game handily. They probably pull away. Syracuse probably pulls away late, I would say, given the firepower that they have on the offensive side. The next game is going to be on the 15th of February, and Syracuse welcomes Binghamton to the Dome for a 4 p.m. showdown. Now, Binghamton always played Syracuse tough for about 3 quarters, and then Syracuse tends to pull away. I think that's going to remain the case. I think Syracuse will eventually pull away. I kind of see it as a 18-12, I would say, matchup. So that would be my prediction for that. Then one of the bigger games happens a couple weeks after that, or actually 8 days after that. One of the bigger games happens, It's one of the bigger, well, actually they have a couple rivalry games lined up, but this is one of the bigger rivalry games for Syracuse, given how tough this team plays them. And it's Army. Army comes calling every year, and Army brings their A game. I've never seen a team that, I don't want to say less talent, but different mindset that they come in with every year. They come in with the game of, we're going to grind you out. We're going to make this, hopefully keep you under 10, and we're going to play it the way we want to play it. We're going to possess the ball. We're going to make sure you guys, we're going to limit your possessions. They're like a run offense in football where you control the clock, basically. They play it their way. The Army game takes place at 1 p.m. And that should be tough. I think Army actually pulls this one out against Syracuse. Like I said, they always tend to play Syracuse tough. So for the fan in me, the Lacrosse fan, and also the Syracuse game, it's fun, but it's also stressful to watch. Syracuse will conclude their final game of their 4-game home stretch against another big rival. Probably, I would say, arguably their biggest rival that's not a powerhouse school, but also that plays Syracuse really tough, in Hobart. That game is going to be taking place at 7 p.m. on the 28th of February. This game is typically played towards the end of the year, but due to Carrier Dome renovations, I think they moved this up. They kind of had to tweak a couple games on their schedule. They moved Albany to a later date, which we'll talk about. So I believe that they flip-flopped the Hobart and the Albany game, which works out because it's home at Syracuse this year. They rotate, so they go home and home. So next year, Syracuse will travel to Hobart and certain games like that. So look for this game to be a tough game. Last year, I know Syracuse pulled away in the 4th. I actually attended that game. I love attending those rivalry games, whether it's at Hobart or at the Dome. I can tell you personally, it's a great atmosphere. But it's going to be a tough game. I know Hobart brings their student section. They typically bring it to the Dome. Their fans come to the Dome. They fill out. They bring a lot of fans to the Dome. So it should be a fun-filled game. Now that's actually going to be the last game in the Dome for this team in 2020. The Carrier Dome renovations are occurring. So they're moving the final 2 home games, which we'll talk about in a little bit, to CNS High School, Cicero, North Syracuse, for those who don't know what it is, local high school in Syracuse. Syracuse hosted Duke last year at CNS, and it was a fantastic atmosphere. It's going to be a tough game. It's going to be a tough pill to swallow. As somebody who's used to attending the games at the Dome, I would say it's going to be a little different. Let me say it that way. But it'll be something to get used to. And on March 7th, this is a game that I like to circle on my calendar every year when I look at games. There's a couple of games. I usually circle about 3 or 4 games. This always happens to be one of them. March 7th, the Orange travel to Johns Hopkins. Johns Hopkins has the band. For those that have never experienced it, for me as an opposing fan of Hopkins, it might be one of the most annoying things to happen during a lacrosse game. They play, I don't know what they play, but they play something after every time Hopkins scores. They're like a pep band. Like, it's a good thing for the game to have a band. I know Syracuse does it typically I don't know if they'll do it this year, but they've done it before where they've had the pep band. So I can say as a fan who's not used to it, it's definitely something different. So look for that to be a big game, though. It's a big rivalry game. They go back years and years and years. I can't say the last time that they didn't play. So look for that to be a big game for this team. It's their first road test, and it's at a great atmosphere at Homewood Field. So look for that to be a good test for this team. I honestly see them pulling away. So out of their first 5, pulling away late, Chase Scanlon should take this game over. So for the first 5 games, I've got them going 4-1 with wins over Colgate, Binghamton, Hobart, and at Hopkins. The lone loss so far that I have on my notes is Army. So look for that to be kind of the sobering moment for this team, if you will. They'll probably ride high off the two wins against Colgate and Binghamton, and then maybe Army will bring them back down. Then they get back up for Hobart and Hopkins. March 14th, the team travels to Rutgers for another pretty good game. Rutgers is an up-and-coming team. They put guys in the pros. So look for them to get amped up for this game. They've used it as a recruiting tool, I'm sure. They say, look, they play in the Big Ten for lacrosse, so that's a good scouting move for them. They can kind of scout out the other conferences, see where they're at. They're up and coming. They've put guys. The guy that's most notably known for them that's in the pros is Jules Hennenberg. Very good player. Kind of a guy that came out highly recruited and also really stepped up his college career. He played a great college career. Although he's no longer with them, he's in the pros. He's been in the pros for a few years. This team is still very good, so don't sleep on them. This is one of those schedules where I'm not looking at it necessarily as there isn't an easy win, but all these games should be tough, in my opinion. I mean, you're looking at teams like in the first slate. You're looking at a team like Army. You're looking at a team like Hobart. These teams, and Colgate and Binghamton, they get amped up for games against Syracuse. I've seen the excitement on these kids' faces when they walk into the dome. I've seen the excitement from the parents of the players. They get amped up, and it's great to see as a lacrosse fan, just the passion from not little schools, but smaller schools that come into the dome and aren't scared of the atmosphere. They embrace it, which is great for the game. So, anyways, back to the schedule. March 21st, we get one of the blue blood rivalries. Since Syracuse has joined the ACC, they go on the road to face the Duke Blue Devils. And it's going to be a tough one. Duke has some really good players coming back on their team. I'm going to try and book one of my followers on Twitter who's a Duke fan for that week, and we're going to try and have a little discussion, get his thoughts on where Duke is at during that week, and just try and get a general thought on how he feels about the game. I've got that pegged as another loss for Syracuse. I think going to Duke is going to be a tough one. It's their first ACC game. Look for Duke to get up for that game. I mean, Duke always tends to play Syracuse tough, so look for that to happen. I just think that, after last year's Syracuse win in overtime, this is the team that's coming out for blood in Duke. So I see them as bouncing back. I see Duke as bouncing back against Syracuse. March 28th, the Orange return to CNS. the Orange debut at CNS, I should say, for the year. Look for that to be a big game. It's against Notre Dame. Notre Dame is one of those schools that I remember distinctly the 100-year anniversary of Syracuse. They came into the Dome and they absolutely embarrassed Syracuse a couple of years ago. So look for Syracuse to get up for that. However, I see Notre Dame as winning that. This is a team that no matter who they have on this team, they will play hard. They fight for every ground ball. They're a scrappy team. So look for them to play good. That game is actually at CNS. Like I said, that is the first of 2 home games at CNS. So I mean, look for that game to be close. Syracuse lost last year 13-10 to Notre Dame, so look for Syracuse to get up. I just think Notre Dame is too good of a team. Hopefully I'm wrong. Too good of a team to not compete with Syracuse, and I see Notre Dame as winning that game. April 3rd is a game that I'm going to circle on my calendar. It's at Albany. So this is the first time as a fan, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong on this. I'm sure one of the season ticket holders that listens will reach out to me if I'm wrong on this. I can't remember a time where Syracuse has went to Albany during the regular season and played at Albany. I don't know if there has been. There might have been, and I might have just missed it in what I was looking at. But typically Syracuse will play host to Albany every year. But I think obviously the big reason why they're going to Albany is the fact that the dome renovations are going on. So it kind of throws a wrench into Syracuse's schedule. So they had to play it by Albany's schedule, play it through Albany's schedule. That's another reason why this game is going to be later in the year. I actually see Syracuse losing to Albany as well. Albany is one of those teams, just like the Cornells, like the Colgates, like the Binghamtons, like the Hobarts and the Armies. A quote smaller school, although Albany is probably the biggest lacrosse school out of those. But one of those schools that just gets up for the Syracuse game. One of those schools that circles the Syracuse on their calendar because all they hear is how good Syracuse is compared to Albany. And just certain things like that. They're one of those teams that circles it. They've got a star-studded team. A bunch of local guys from Syracuse would play into that motivation. So look for Albany to play Syracuse tough. I've actually got Syracuse losing that one. It's just it's tough because I think that's one of those games that I can coin flip it and it can go either way. There's not a lot of those games on the schedule. It's either they win or lose this game. I've got that as a coin flip game. So, and then that following week, once again, the Albany game is April 3rd at 7 p.m. at Albany. That following week, they go to Cornell. Cornell is one of those games that is another game I like to circle. I like to circle on my schedule. So I typically circle the smaller schools that come to Syracuse on my. I typically tend to circle those games because those are the games I love to go see. Those are the games that are going to be the most well attended, I would say. Besides the Dukes, besides the Hopkins, besides the other Blue Bloods in lacrosse. Cornell is going to play the Syracuse tough. They always get up for it. They've got a star-studded attackman in Jeff Teat, who is going to hopefully get shut down in this game, but he always seems to get points, whether it's assists or goals. So I look for him to kind of step up, and although I don't think it'll be enough, as I've said before in the other episode where I talk about the roster, Syracuse comes in with more offensive power than it had last year. And I believe, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, I don't have it in front of me, of course, but they beat Cornell last year 13-8. So look for Cornell to be to have a rivalry, have a little extra motivation to beat the Syracuse team. They're very good. They went there. They probably will attend there right around their senior day. That's when it typically tends to line up. So look for that to be a big game. And then April 11th, which is just 4 days later, they play that rough stretch. They tend to do it. This year it works out. It's in April, whatever. They play a rough stretch where Syracuse will play a rough stretch. They play 3 games in 8 days. They host Carolina, and Carolina will actually be on senior day. I don't know how they'll work that out. I don't know if there's any special plans to maybe do it. I don't know how they'll work it out at CNS. Typically, the guys will walk. If it's at the Dome, they'll walk out of the end. They'll walk through the end zone. I don't know if they'll have something set up where they'll still walk out, or whether they'll do it a different way. But Carolina is going to be a tough game for this team as well. That's their third of 4 ACC games. Look for that to be a tough one. I've got Syracuse winning that. They beat Carolina last year, 12-9, in the regular season, but also lost to them in the ACC championship game, 11-10. So look for Syracuse to have revenge on their minds as they go into this game. Then, on April 18th, Syracuse travels to Virginia. That's going to be a tough game to finish off their regular season. UVA always plays Syracuse tough. Every single time. I mean, interesting note, last year, Syracuse lost in overtime to them, so look for Syracuse to get up for that. It's a good test at the end of the regular season, going into postseason play for this team. Good final test, great atmosphere. Love that area down there. That's another one that I circle. It's a good stadium. A lot of the venues that Syracuse plays at, or that Lacrosse has in general, are very good. So I'm happy to see that in the stadium sense. That's where the game is going. People are upgrading their facilities. They're getting better lacrosse stadiums. They're getting lacrosse only stadiums, which is huge for the game. It's only going to help. And it's only going to get bigger as the game continues to grow. So back to Virginia. I've got Syracuse actually winning that one. So look for that to be a tough one, like I said. The thing that is amazing and interesting at the same time, April 25th through 27th is the ACC tournament. So the interesting thing about that is the number 1 seed typically hosts out of the 4 schools. The number one seed typically will host the tournament. That's how the tournament works. That's how the ACC committee figured it out. It's a system that works. Interesting thing to note, if Syracuse can host, they get to host it at CNS. I like the fact that it would be there. I think it would be a great atmosphere. All the teams that are in the ACC, their fans travel very well, as do many lacrosse fans. So that would be a humongous, a great thing for the universities, while also promoting it to the local areas like the CNSs, like the Liverpools, schools like that are in the Syracuse area that may not get to see it, can go out to the Syracuse can go out to CNS and watch it. So I think that's a huge one. Huge possible event that could happen down the road. I've got the Orange going 8-4. So going back through my losses, I've got them losing to Army, Duke, Albany, and Notre Dame. So that would be them, me and them finishing 8-2 with an 8-4 record. I hope better than that. I know what these teams that I have them losing to play like against them, and I've seen it too many times. So I just think it's. I hope they win. I hope they go 9-3. I just think 8-4 is a realistic expectation for this team. Last year, I know that they went 9-5. So I just think it's a different team this year. So look for that, and then they can look for this team to make some noise in the NCAA tournament. We'll talk about that as it gets more towards the NCAA tournament as the season progresses. But like I said, looking forward, I would say I'm gonna hopefully have a game-by-game recap. Kind of talk over what we did right, guys that stepped up during the game, guys that I thought could have played better. I guess not necessarily criticizing, but could have played better. So I look for that. Look forward to that. Hopefully, I'm gonna book a couple of my season ticket holder friends. Get their thoughts going into the year, where they think this team is at. Kind of get their thoughts. I want to get their thoughts on where they think this team could be, where they're at. How good can this team be, I guess, is the question. And looking at their schedule, it's a pretty good schedule for the year. So this team could do some damage in the ACC. If they get on a run and they get hot, they might not lose to a Duke. They might not lose to a Notre Dame. I think the Army and Albany games are trap games in a sense, but they aren't because of how good Army and Albany play Syracuse every year. So, like I said, I've got the Orange going 8-4. Like I said, if you want to reach out on social media, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter and or Instagram at Qs1987. I will have a Twitter page hopefully pretty soon for the actual podcast. So I'll give that out as it happens. So my 22 cents on this, I figured I'd change it up a little bit. The 22 cents is going to come at the end. We'll close with the 22 cents. My 22 cents on this team is they're going to be better than last year. Record's about the same, but I just see this team being more talented. And I don't know. I see this team doing more damage than losing in the first round of the NCAA tournament. I can tell you that right now. I see more potential. Potential is a big word. It's a word all sports fans use. So they have potential. Whether they do it or not, we'll see. But once again, if you want to chat, my social media is on Twitter is Qs1987, and that is also my Instagram handle. Feel free to reach out. Once again, I know I said it earlier in the episode, but if you're on Facebook, go find the Qs Yourself group. Great group of fans. Also on Twitter, I believe. They're on Twitter at Qs Yourself, so go find that. Great interaction. There's a couple of people on there that are huge fans that we're going to get out to for a lacrosse game for their first time, and we're going to teach them a little bit about the game, which is a huge get for lacrosse fans. You got people that I can tell you firsthand, I've seen videos of them at football and basketball games. They're some of the most passionate people at the game. And then you bring them to a lacrosse event, and we can make it an electric atmosphere. Even more electric. You know, they can lead the We RSU chants possibly. They can do something, bring their element to the lacrosse game. So I look forward to that. So that's a couple things to look forward to. Once again, if you're on Facebook, go find them at Cuse Yourself. Very welcoming group. A lot of hot takes. But most of their takes are the ones that we think of but nobody types out, I would say, is the way I would say it. So look forward to that. Once again, go to Cuse Yourself on Facebook, search it, join it, discuss. Once again, reach out to me on Twitter and Instagram at Cuse1987. Thank you.